wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another amazing episode of Alwasi TV. Tonight we are joined by a very special guest, which I'm very excited to introduce and speak to tonight. I'd like to introduce Hajj Tom Toby. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Welcome to the podcast.
God bless you. What a privilege it is for me to be here.
Allah yahmaik, Allah khalina yak ya Rabb. Tom, I'd like to kick off with a little bit about yourself. If you could just kick off with some of your history. You've grown up locally in Australia, I can tell by your accent.
I was born in Australia. So my parents emigrated to Australia in 1974.
The first fleet.
The first fleet, indeed. And I was born in 1976.
MashaAllah.
And here I am today.
You're one of our youth movement people.
Well,
76.
Absolutely.
I'm considered a youth on this podcast, so therefore you must be.
Right. Well, I'm glad to see that the meanings of words here alter.
Allah khalina yak, Tom. Tom, I've had a quick look at, obviously I've done some snooping around online. I've had a look at your some of your profiles and so on, and I've noticed a lot of the focus around photography and around imagery on your Instagram, and more generally around religion as well, with your photos of the Arba'een, as well as other ziyarah, as well as other imagery around. I've seen some sports imagery. I've seen some family photos and stuff, so like professional family photos, etc. Could you want to take us through how your journey got to from growing up and then into the photography?
Yeah, I mean that obviously that's a very long story, so I'll try to be as concise as possible.
Be as detailed as you can. We're very interested in it.
Look, I was what you would call a perpetual student when I was young, and that certainly doesn't imply that I was studious. I was just really stuck at university, not really knowing what it is that I wanted to do, and all of the things that are entailed with that. And coupled with that, you've got the pressures of family who want you to be a particular thing and fit into a particular mold, and I very much didn't.
Yeah.
And so for a long time, I think I just sort of floated around until one day I discovered photography. And from the minute that I experienced it for the very first time, I knew that's what I wanted to do for life.
Was someone there to introduce you to it, or was it just something you fell into?
It was actually by sheer fluke. I was in New York at the time, and I happened to stumble into an art exhibition.
Yes.
And I just thought, this is truly profound. And it was nothing to do with religion. I was not what you would call a typical religious person at that time. And in fact, a lot of my beginnings in photography revolved around things which are completely not Husseini in any way, shape or form. I was, I guess to label it, I was a high fashion photographer.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to work here in Australia and all around the world as in that capacity. So it was a very sort of
fast-paced,
definitely.
A lot of travel.
A lot of travel at the very highest echelons of that craft.
Yeah.
My mentors and the people that I worked for were some of the best photographers of their generations. So it was and they were very nurturing in the sense that, and I guess the way that it was approached from my perspective this was make or break.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to be those other things that I had studied, for example. I wasn't very good at them to start with. I did them simply because my parents thought that I should go to university, and that was that. And so when I discovered photography, it was something about it that sort of said, well, you either do this and do it properly, or you're going to be stuck doing things that you don't want to do.
Yeah.
And I discovered very, very quickly that I was one of those people that actually got up in the morning and couldn't wait to get to work.
Wow. Wow. That is a profound feeling.
It really is. And it's life altering, especially when I had spent so much of my youth literally drifting, not knowing what I wanted to do. And I guess there was a bit of an unfortunate factor to it that I sort of gravitated toward that genre. But subhanallah, I mean, I went from photographing supermodels to photographing the shrines of Imam Hussein alayhi salam.
Subhanallah.
So
Was there a point in time, or was it a gradual thing where you moved from high fashion across to, other areas of photography?
So here in Australia, high fashion had already begun to dwindle. So I guess the best of circles belonged either in Europe or in the United States, and I had already sort of come back and made my life here in Australia. So I had to start exploring other avenues, and funny enough, a lot of the audience will be able to tell by looking at me, I actually became a very good food photographer.
My kind of guy.
And I was very lucky. I was working for some of the biggest names in Australia in terms of that.
I think that's something that's profound regarding photography, is that there's so many things it's applicable to.
Absolutely.
It's not something that and I think that's part of the motivation or the motivating factor day to day, is that you always have something new to work on, and it's a new subject and new things to explore about how to take an interesting photograph that others may or may not have seen before.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because most people, once they find out you're a photographer, the first question that comes to mind is, "Oh, so you photograph weddings?" And I'm like, no. No, I don't. People have a very sort of limited perception of what photography is.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that that's unique to our community. I think that's true across the board. But also I think a lot of people look at it as so what else do you do?
Like it's a side.
Yeah, it's a side hustle, or it's a hobby. And I will be the first person to attest that photography should never be anybody's hobby.
Yeah.
Because it is too expensive. And it's enough to send you broke and get you divorced. So you either do it properly or you don't.
Yes.
So I sort of had to shift focus, if you like, pardon the pun, and I started delving into the more sort of commercial advertising work that was very prevalent here in Australia. And then all of a sudden, and I can sort of preempt your next question. A cousin of mine, a very, very, very dear, beautiful brother of mine, he came up to me one day and just sort of said, "Tom, it's Dua Kumail tonight. Why don't you come with me to the Jaffs?" To the
Jaffari Centre, yes.
And I sort of looked at him and I thought to myself, I'm not averse. I'm not averse. I just haven't been participating, but I'm not averse. And so I said, all right,
let's go.
Come. And that night I went down to the Jaffs, and it was life-altering.
Yeah.
It was absolutely life-altering. I sat down, listened to the dua, and then a young brother came up to me who I'd never met before. And he said to me, "What do you do?" I said, "Oh, I'm a photographer." He said, "Oh, that's interesting." He
do you
said,
do weddings?
Yeah, he actually did ask me that.
No.
But beyond that, he said something to me which, till this day, makes the hair on my arm stand up.
Yeah.
He said, "My brother passed away a couple of years ago, and I'd never met his brother, and God rest his soul. And his brother was a wonderful reciter of the Quran. And he said to me, my brother had always had this idea to do a documentary on the Arba'een. This is the first day I walk into the Jafari."
Yeah.
I said, "Oh yeah." I said, "What's the Arba'een?"
Yeah, because at that point you probably had no idea what it was.
No idea.
Yeah.
And what I'm about to share with you, I share with a great deal of embarrassment.
No, absolutely not.
But he said to me, I said, what's the Arba'een? He said, oh, it's the Arba'een of Abu Abdullah. And I just stopped and I said, who? He said, Abu Abdullah. I said, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. And he said, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. I said, oh, of course, I know Imam al-Hussein.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, Abu Abdullah. And it's pathetic, but I did not know that Abu Abdullah was Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam.
Yeah.
So I knew very much at that point that I was starting from way below zero. And I said, okay. I said, so you guys must all be in the, filmmaking business. And they said, no. I said, what do you do? He said, well, I'm an architect. I said, okay. I said, well, all that tells me is that you're smart, but, we're going to need somebody to run these cameras. He said, well, I can learn. I said, great. When you're done in 4 years, come back and see me. He said, no. We want to go this year.
Wow.
Now, this was 2013.
This goes a lot. It shows the passion of the Shia, doesn't it?
It's
they make
profound.
things happen out of nothing.
Look, I don't want to get carried away with those sentiments.
Yeah.
Because nothing comes from nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. It all comes from Allah
Right.
subhanahu wa ta'ala.
But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also makes it incumbent on us not to treat it as nothing, to actually enter these projects and enter these enterprises knowing full well what the objective is and knowing how to execute that objective.
Serve Allah.
So, yeah, it's just not good enough to say, well, this is what we're going to do and Allah be the better. No, Allah be the better. That goes without saying.
But you have to do.
We have to know what we're doing.
And we have to plan it.
Absolutely.
And do it well and represent it well.
Absolutely.
I think we had our first actually, it's interesting you said that in sponsorship with Imam Ali College with Sayyid Hassan Mudarrisi, we had a live podcast with Sheikh Ali Mahdi.
Oh, yes.
From the Jafariya Center in Muhammadi Welfare Center, the Jamia up in Kemps Creek.
I know it well.
That was our first live. It was live streamed podcast.
Wow.
And if you could imagine the conversation between these two pillars of our community, we had Sayyid Hassan Mudarrisi in front of me here, and we had Sheikh Ali Mahdi facing the two of us, and we're having this conversation around, I think people in your position and in my position, I think we share a very similar backstory from what you've just shared with me. And I think, and we've said this a number of times, I don't get bored, viewers, but it's important. We've said it in a number of our podcasts so far. We've launched one, we've had it on the live stream, and it will probably be repeated in the other ones, and we'll repeat it here. Our community needs to reach not the regulars at the mosque. Our events need to be for people and reaching people like you and I who aren't necessarily regulars at the mosque but are on the fringes.
Well,
who are Muslim but need some sort of way to interact with the community when they're not familiar with anyone in the community.
Well, I guess I'm going to digress here because this isn't my expertise and not what I'm here to speak about. But I think it's an important point.
Yeah.
Look, I absolutely despise the word community. I hate it.
Why?
Because it is definitive of nothing. All the word community means is a group of people that adhere to a particular principle. Mm-hmm. Now that I can accept. But even within that community,
there are subgroups.
Everybody thinks differently.
Absolutely.
Everybody acts differently. Everybody has different objectives, different methodologies, different machinations. And I think when we use the word community, we sort of want to paint everybody with the same brush. And I think that's problematic.
I disagree, respectfully.
Yeah.
I think the word community means unique identity, but united under the one, banner of our religion.
If that's the definition of community, then I accept it. I
Yeah.
like that definition.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I don't think that's what most people think
out
of
there
the
in
word.
the yeah. Well, I mean, I suppose within the Shia community, I'll keep using that word community.
Yeah.
But with our Shia community and being a Shia, and the beauty of being a Shia is that uniqueness is encouraged.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think where you were, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you that opportunity and exposed you, and that changed part of your life.
Absolutely. It changed my life.
But imagine
completely.
if you had an opportunity, had some sort of exposure earlier.
Oh, look,
Who's to say it wouldn't have changed, earlier, for example.
I think that's just in the realms of the hypothetical.
Absolutely.
And I can't speak to that because it could have gone either way.
Yes.
I think in terms of my work, look, I think I sort of discovered it at that moment where I was looking for purpose for my work.
Yeah.
Because it really had become, I guess, purposeless. It was money orientated. This was my
you've
profession.
achieved the height of it, right? At that stage, you're sort of like, where to from here?
I did, and I was, but for me, it was more. I mean, for me, when it comes to photography, it is a challenge of photography that is always front and center of my mind. I mean,
what do you mean by challenge?
Photographers are, for the lack of a better word, problem solvers.
Ah, yes.
Because
it's a puzzle.
A million things can and will go wrong, and you have to fix them as you go along.
Mm-hmm.
And what? It's funny. I teach photography, and you'll have students come in and say, right, how do I photograph this? And I sort of deal in the very sort of technical realms of photography. So for me, I guess you could sort of classify me as a lighting expert. Okay. That's where for me, photography, I mean, the very definition of photography, as far as I'm concerned, is that it is a study of light. So as soon as you understand light, you understand photography. And
because really the photograph is the after effect of getting all of that correct.
Well, it's the interpretation of the artist of how light is interacting with the subject.
Yeah. And you mentioned you're teaching that.
That's right.
So you've gone from, not knowing what you are, to defining what you are, to excelling your skill set in that area, and then passing that knowledge on.
I think because of the people that I've had in my life that were so generous in the information that they gave to me, I just couldn't see it any other way.
Yeah.
And I think that's where nurturing, I think, plays a huge role.
And I think the other side of the equation is, a lot of obviously reaching out to the youth and reaching out to the members of the Shia community and etc. Showing what you do gives them the opportunity to say, you know what, Ibadi can be something different. It doesn't necessarily need to be a lecture.
Sure.
You as part of your Ibadi, you could be teaching a skill set. The other side of the equation is creating these beautiful images, which we'll bring up in a moment, and really moving someone emotionally at anywhere in the world, on any device, on, they could go on, I think they can purchase through your website or something, wasn't it?
Sure. And we'll get to that. But I mean, I think what I really want to talk about in terms of the youth or anybody interested in pursuing something like this is that just a bit of something anecdotal. I asked one of my mentors very early on in my career, I said, look, what's the best bit of equipment that I could really sink my teeth into now? And I was expecting him to talk about a particular camera or a particular lens, or he said, Tom, go buy yourself a really good pad and pen. And that was baffling to me. And I thought he was taking the mickey out of me. And but I knew him well enough to know that he wasn't. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, because the most important thing you will ever have as an artist is an idea. Now, you need to write these ideas down because you may not be able to photograph them today.
Yeah.
Right? But one day, you'll have the equipment that you always hope for. You'll have the ability to use that equipment, and you'll have the idea. So I sat with him and I actually brainstormed with him for a little bit. And he said, don't tell me your ideas, but write them down. So I wrote down this idea, and I'd always was interested in the way people manifest in their faces the emotions that they're feeling. And so I came up with this idea that I wanted to sit as a homeless person. And I actually did this. I dressed up as a homeless guy, and I mean, I smell bad most days, so that was easy. And sat down in Martin Place.
Yes.
And put a box, hit a camera on a time release, on a shutter release, and just as people would come and drop money, I take a photo of their face, unbeknownst to them. And it was just the most incredible.
Raw.
Some people, you could see the disgust in their face. Some people, you can see the genuine empathy in their face. Some of them just did not even want to look at you, just drop it and run. And it was just profound. Now, the thing is, well, you might sort of say, well, and, you know, to me, it was a wonderful narrative on society. It was my way of describing society to people that hadn't thought about that particular thing. And had I not have thought of that idea maybe 7 or 8 years before I actually did it, I probably wouldn't have thought of it.
And if you hadn't written it down?
Written it down.
You would have gone.
Right. Now, I could have, there was one of my favorite teachers that I ever had in photography was a woman called Julie Sundberg. Brilliant photographer, magnificent photographer. And she had one of the most horrible cameras I'd ever seen. And I swear to God, if I had walked down the street and seen her camera on the side of the road, I would have jumped on it just to make sure nobody else would have ever used it. It was just horrible.
Yes.
And I had a great camera. Really good camera.
Yep.
And being the arrogant so-and-so that I am and was, I said, Julie, why do you use such... why do you use such crappy equipment? And she said, Tom, I'd much rather take a great shot with a crappy camera than a crappy shot with a great camera.
Yeah.
Magic. It stuck with me.
Because it's not necessarily the equipment.
It's the idea.
It's the heart and the mind.
It's the idea. What is it that you're trying... Because what is a photographer? Well, what is any artist? Every artist you have ever met, no matter whatever medium that they choose, is a storyteller. So what is the story that I'm trying to tell? And this was one of the things that I had to talk about with these young men from the Jafari.
Yeah.
13 of them.
Wow.
13 of them said, you know what? We're going to do this.
MashaAllah.
All right. And it was, to me, it was baffling. It just didn't make any sense to me. Like, here we are having to marshal and work out and, I guess, project manage these young guys who had zero experience. And add on top of that, a group of young hotheads as well, who very happily told me where I could go when they didn't like what I said.
Yeah.
And it was hard. And I remember thinking to myself, this is never going to come off. But it did.
MashaAllah.
And but they learnt very, very quickly. And I was trying to instill in them the whole time that we were filming in Karbala. It was like, guys. And I was very particular about something, and this is not something that I speak about openly because you're not supposed to self-censor, you're not supposed to self-filter, but to me, the cause was too important.
Absolutely.
So I did self-censor. There was a lot of things that I saw which I thought did not, what's the phrase? Did not show the Arba'in in its finest light. Mm-hmm. Because, of course, people are individuals and people will do things that,
But it's raw. It's what it is.
But because I knew, for me, and this was a very, very important thing, I hate thinking about our faith in an insular way.
Okay.
I just don't like it. because I think the minute you become insular, it's like I think it becomes a lot like what is happening now with our Jewish brothers and sisters. It's we are the chosen people, we are the ones, we are it, and therefore I think things turn very ugly when you harbour that sort of mentality. So for me, it was always about, okay, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam is the very cornerstone of my thinking when it comes to being a Muslim. But Imam al-Hussein is for everybody. And I want to show Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam to everybody.
Yep.
And you have to be cognizant of, well, who is your audience? And what is the story that you're trying to tell? And there's actually one image that, inshallah, we'll get to have a look at pretty soon. But, just thinking about that image now, automatically I'm transformed to the two very different narratives I have for that image, depending on who I'm talking to.
Yeah. And was something there you saw detracted from that, you mean?
Look, there were some things that I think were beyond the pale.
Yep.
Seeing a person scrape his face along the floor for 200 meters to get to the maqam, to me, I'm not questioning that person's sincerity. I'm not in any way, shape or form. But my job as a storyteller is to try to tell a palatable story.
Yeah.
Is try to sort of... look, I'll give you a perfect example. In 2022, I was invited to do an exhibition of my work at the New South Wales Parliament House, right?
Yes.
Which was a big deal for us.
Absolutely.
Okay? Not because I give any credence or any significance to the Parliament of New South Wales. I genuinely don't. But I thought that it would be a good forum. Okay? Now, I remember being there, and I remember thinking to myself, imagine a Sayyid or a Sheikh doing a majlis for Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam in the halls of Parliament with all of the crying and all of the latam and all of that. It would simply get lost in translation. It'd be very difficult to explain after the fact what people had just witnessed.
Yeah, you'll need the context going in.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yes.
So there are things that we need to get better at doing in a more public forum.
Do you think explaining and communicating that context is a part of that?
Absolutely, but how do you do that? And what time are you afforded to do that? What sort of research does the other party need to engage in?
Absolutely, yeah.
Right? So it becomes a very cumbersome way of doing things. Now, for me, one of my favorite experiences is to sit in a powerful majlis and cry myself to sleep. It's something that is visceral in the way that it manifests itself in a Shia. But that is not, in my opinion, humble opinion, stupid opinion, that
no, don't say that.
that this is not the way that I think we should or need to communicate ourselves to a general, largely ignorant other.
Okay.
I think there are better ways of doing that. And the arts, I think, have been incredibly powerful and potent and able. When I get to the image that I'm thinking about, I'll tell you a very funny story relating to it, and I think it'll go some ways to explain that old Australian adage of horses for courses.
Okay.
Just sort of having the right thing, having the right tool to express that opinion, that story, that narrative.
Do you also believe that it's a two-way street, in that the narrative and the communication of that context is obviously upon us to do, but also the other has a responsibility as well to
But they don't.
Try and learn.
But they don't have a responsibility. Some of them have a want, and I think that's what we have to work on. But to say that they have a responsibility, I think we have a responsibility so that when the opportunity arises, that we're so polished and so brilliantly ready to sort of espouse that message.
Yep.
I think that responsibility falls on us.
You know what? I respect that opinion, and I think it's a a valuable point of view. I think the context that I've had is around, well, personally, I've had enough of trying to present myself or present what I believe in or present the Shia Islam in a way that's palatable to anyone. For me, it's what it is. If you're going to be the kind of individual that is open-minded enough and have that want and desire and want to absorb some knowledge about a member of another citizen of your country, then it's there for you. And we are all, as members of the Shia community, are there to you can come and speak to us anytime about whatever the context is.
I think you and I agree on that.
But I don't think, how many years have I'll speak about me. How many years have I spent, clean shaven, wearing a suit, trying to fit into a group of people and then trying to show them my religion in a way that's familiar to their eyes, coming from whatever backgrounds they are. Whereas now I'm of the opinion that no, it is different and we're unique and individual and this is what we do. And if you are a member of, the Australian culture, well, then I am a member of Australian culture and therefore this is part of my culture as well.
I think, and again, I always take things back to the arts. And I think the arts...
The arts is a very powerful communication mechanism.
It is, but
Absolutely.
It's also, I think, a social commentary. And I think that's an important emphasis to put, right? So I think of any social commentary, people gravitate to the beautiful. Right?
This is true.
Right. So, and our faith, the machinations of our faith, the iconography of our faith, is magnificently beautiful,
and it's beauty in its genuineness.
It's beauty in its honestly, and I think this is me being more Shia than the Shia, but it's just beautiful in its entirety.
Absolutely,
it really is something magnificent. But I think let me give you an example. A couple of years ago. Was it? I think. Forgive me. I can't remember whether it was pre-COVID or post-COVID, but right on the
grey
periphery.
area COVID for
right on that periphery, right?
Yeah.
And it was pre because it was the last march that we did in the city. Before COVID shut down.
Yes,
everything, and I love that procession. And I'm sort of in my element when I'm there. I mean, I will literally most people sort of go there and take 100 photos or 200 photos. I shoot upwards of about 5,500 photos.
Wow.
And I post every single one of those photos.
MashaAllah.
Right? Because I'm not there just hoping to catch that perfect photo. I want everybody there to have a photo of themselves engaged in that procession. And I remember standing on a corner, and most of the procession had walked past, and right at the very end there was a group of about 15 brothers who decided to stop in the middle of Pitt Street and do this brilliant latam. And it was powerful, it was palpable. Yeah? I mean, I'm standing there and I'm in awe of it.
Goosebumps.
Right? But there was this I'm certain he was a barrister because he had that massive wheelie briefcase thing, and he had that sort of, I don't know, that sort of
judgmental look.
No, I would say that sort of intellectual look about him. Yeah, genuinely inquisitive, but without the context, genuinely baffled and probably a little bit afraid. And so I walked over to him and I said, "What do you think?" He said, "Jesus, I've never seen that before." I said, "But you have." He said, "Where?" I said, "Mate, this is just an Islamic haka." But it's a haka of mourning,
Yeah,
of sadness.
Whereas the haka usually is for war.
Right.
Mm.
And he just stood there, and this smile broke out across his face as though he had just seen the most profound thing he'd ever seen. But it finally made sense.
Yep, he can relate to it.
Right. Okay. Now, I'm certainly not here to toot my own horn, because my wife will be watching and she'll cut me down to size very quickly. But I thought, yeah, I think I got that one right.
Yeah.
Okay. It was a small description of something that made it all of a sudden relevant to this individual and made that person inquisitive about it in a
And
positive.
he may have been asking questions later on and open him up.
I'm a bit more of a realist. I reckon he probably went home and told his wife and forgot about it the next day. But that's not my department.
That's right.
My department is that, look, I was in a position where perhaps I could ask somebody to think about something a little bit differently. And they did. Done. Right?
That's a beautiful story.
To me, it was just one of those nicer moments.
It is.
You know, because more often than not, I get it wrong.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, a funny true story. My wife is a Sunni Muslim.
Okay.
Okay. And I've not been able to change her mind yet. And that to me says something very profound. What kind of example have you been, Tom? Well, thinking back, probably not a very good one. Right?
I think you're very hard on judging yourself.
Well, I'm pragmatic. I mean, the results are in the proof's in the pudding. So
but don't forget, Allah's in the mix as well.
there's no doubt about that. And Allah yahdi man yasha wa yudhillu man yasha. And I've no qualms about that. But, you know, I think very early on in the piece, I was certainly a lot more aggressive in nature. But what do you mean you don't understand it? What do you mean how can you possibly think that? And I discovered after many bruises that that's not how you engage in that conversation.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Now I try to be a lot more delicate about things, a lot more philosophical about things. I think that speaks to my own growth. But I shouldn't negate the fact that I'd probably caused a lot of damage beforehand. So, you know, how we tell these stories, how we derive these narratives matters.
Absolutely.
Because more often than not, you get one crack at it.
Yeah, this is true. And it's first impression only happens once.
Absolutely right.
I think, you know, in different ways, you know, Sayyid Hassan and I have had these conversations before, particularly because Sayyid Hassan Madarsi is the imam at the Al-Mahdi Mosque.
Al-Mahdi Mosque, that's right.
Here in Campbelltown. And we always talk about presenting the mosque in a beautiful way.
Sure.
Lights on,
Sure.
the air conditioning on.
Absolutely.
You know, everything is laid out, carpets vacuumed. I think he's fighting quite hard at the moment to get new carpets in.
Brilliant.
And to just modernize the look and feel of it. Because the visuals matter a lot in some cases, in most cases.
Yeah.
With, you know, particularly around things that are to do with worship and ibadat Allah, you want it to be presented in the best possible light.
Well, you know, I think you're just going to think I'm being a smart aleck now, but I'm genuinely not. When I first got to Karbala, the only thing that I was fixated on was these things of bricks and mortar called the shrines. Now, I remember standing in front of the shrine of Imam Ali alayhi salam, and you could have killed me with a feather. I was falling apart. And actually, just a little backstory to that.
I can see you hit you here.
I got on a plane from Beirut. This is 2014. We're sitting on the tarmac in Beirut airport when the guy sitting next to me sees another guy walking over to us, and he just instinctively knew to get up and move. And this man came and sat beside me. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. This guy's head was like that big. His shoulders were like this wide. I mean, this guy looked like he chewed nails, just for fun, right? And he came and he sat right beside me. And he turned to me, and in the most beautiful, softly spoken voice I'd ever heard in my life, this guy could have been one of those movie narrators. Just had that beautiful softness about him. And he looked at me and he said, "Your name is Talal Toby, right?" I went, "All right, somebody set me up for a gag here." I said, "Yeah." He said, "You're going to do a documentary for Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam." I said, "Yeah." He said, "You're from Aytarun." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Aytarun is known for two things." I'm thinking, Jesus, where's this guy going with this? And I said, "All right." He said, "Aytarun is either known for shuhada or umala." I looked at him and I said, "Well, I'm from Australia. I'm not either of them." He said to me, "Well, let me tell you something about where you're going." He's talking to me in Arabic, softly spoken. He said, You're gonna come within the vicinity of Imam Ali alayhi salam, and you're gonna feel like your chest is about to explode." He said, "You will feel genuinely bulletproof." He said, "You'll feel like you're floating." And he was describing these things in a lot of detail, in a lot of poetic prose. And he said, "You're just going to walk through and then he said, "And then you're going to get to Imam al-Hussein." And he couldn't even say the word Hussein, and he just burst into tears, right? I hadn't been yet. And I'm thinking, this guy's a psychic. He's also probably mad. And how the hell did I end up sitting beside him? Well, I discovered very much later on, not through him, through others, that this was a very significant person in southern Lebanon. I said, okay. And then I went there. And I stood in front of that shrine of Imam Ali alayhi salam, and I swear to God, I thought I wasn't going to walk to Karbala, I was going to fly to Karbala, I was going to skim the earth. And then I got to Karbala and I felt that shattering. But Hajj, it wasn't until I came back, started processing my images, and there's a great nurturing process that occurs when you're dealing with this photography, because photography is a process. And I was nurturing these images and getting them ready. Since 2014, I've shot 115,000 portraits of the Zawar of Imam al-Hussein.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah.
And this is where the narrative changes. And I know you're thinking, what's this guy talking about? We were talking about the mosque and all that, and I'm going to get to it.
Yes, yeah. Take your time.
And for me, there was a thesis that came out of that work, and it was a thesis in reverse, because we had gone there to photograph the bricks and mortar. I was there to see the shrines, to photograph those shrines, and then I discovered no.
You discovered yourself?
I discovered that what did Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam do 1400 years ago that today 20 plus million people are walking to him?
SubhanAllah.
So for me, it turned away from that bricks and mortar, and I knew very quickly that this story was a human story. It was people. So with us, look, if we're going to compete with other people, we're going to struggle. Have you been to the Vatican?
No.
I have. Wow. It's wow.
Yeah.
Spectacular.
Yeah.
Have you been to the Louvre?
No.
Wow. I could spend a month in the Louvre. Right? So we're not competing on things of bricks and mortar. But how many pilgrims stand in St. Peter's Square.
Not as
They're
much.
devoted to Jesus or,
Whoever.
right?
Yeah.
None. Very few.
You've hit the nail on the head with that one.
People. So for me, going back to this long-winded explanation of what I was trying to say, is that our places of worship are so important, but it is the people that reside within these places, and it is the faces and the voices that others hear and see that actually make the difference.
Did you know, or did they explain to you the story before going of Imam al-Hussein?
Oh. I thought I was an expert.
Yeah.
I did. Yeah. I did my research. And in fact, one of the funny things is I always say to people that look at my art, I always say, look, you're probably going to really like it, but what you're going to discover very quickly when you actually go to these places is that Tom Toby is not a very good photographer. Because, I'm sorry, there is no image to encapsulate
It's a living thing.
what it is that, Sant, you've smashed it out of the park. It is a living thing. And it is undefinable.
Immeasurable. Unique in every way.
And it has to be cataclysmic. It has to be something that genuinely causes an eruption within you.
There's an energy.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I don't know of anything else where people describe their place of worship in that context. Now, that's not to detract from other people. I'm not interested in doing that. I think people believe at the level that they believe in. And that's with God. That's between them and God.
Each to their own.
Absolutely. But we have something that is so incredibly profound. And I know that word gets thrown around a lot, but
it is.
It is profound. There's no other word for it.
Yeah.
There is something so profound that all we can do is try to reflect some of the glimpses of that light.
Back.
That's all we can do.
Yeah. And it's a hard thing to do even at that level.
Oh, there's no doubt.
I think, how was that feeling? Like when you went there on a mission, you went there obviously with the intention of ziyarah and as well as to do the documentary, and you were around, the lovers of Ahlul Bayt and Imam al-Hussein. But that first physical glimpse at the ma'am and all of the, like, physically looking at it and then, absorbing that emotionally into your heart, that feeling, how was that feeling?
Look, one of the important things I think to really understand, and I'm talking now to people that haven't been yet.
Like
right?
me.
Wow. You will have so many first experiences that it almost feels like every portion of it is its own ziyarah. You will not visit Imam Ali alayhi salam and experience what you experience with Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam.
Each is unique.
Absolutely. You will not experience what you experience with Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam with Abu Fadl Abbas alayhi salam.
SubhanAllah.
And one of the things that really irks me about people that make the ziyarah is that for a great many of them, they don't know where they are.
Physically, you mean?
Physically.
Wow. Then you would do the preparation.
Even when you do.
Wow.
You don't realize where you are. I remember 2014, in my mind, was the busiest year in Karbala that I'd ever experienced, and it was my first experience. It was just phenomenal in how busy it was.
Yeah.
Right? And I remember anything that you wanted to do during the ziyarah literally took hours and hours and hours, right? And I remember we were walking, we'd finished filming for the day, and we were just literally there to do a ziyarah. And we were walking, and I came around this corner from behind the shrine, and then all of a sudden I look up and there's this little maqam, this little building. And I grabbed one of the guys, I said, "What's that?" And he just looked at me and he sort of half smiled, half cried, he said, "That's the Tal Zainabi." Now, Hajj, I've been to Karbala 10 times now.
Yeah.
I can go visit Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam and feel the shattering of my heart. I can visit Abu Fadl Abbas alayhi salam and cry. But when I get to the Tal Zainabi, brother, I don't want anybody next to me. I will sit down and cry like a little girl in a heap on the floor, just imagining and picturing what the Tal Zainabi actually represents. And you will get people walk straight past it,
Not know what it is.
not have a clue, not pay it a second's thought. And you think, you've come all this way. Now, I'm not saying that arrogantly. I too have missed and bypassed a lot of things. But it's one of those things about being in Karbala. You have to immerse yourself in it. You have to be present. It's not a holiday, all right? It is something that you may or may not do once in your life. Who knows? It is the most addictive thing you've ever done in your life. I remember actually a relation of Sayyid Hassan. So in 2015, I went back for the second installment of the documentary.
Yes.
We had access to a camera back then, which was given to us as a rental for free. The rental of that camera is $1,250 a day.
Wow.
All right. It is a $117,000 phase 1 medium format camera.
Wow.
Okay. Now this guy, they owned a camera shop up in Artarmon. He and I sort of came through the ranks together in photography. So I was very sort of appreciative of his work. He was very, very capable photographer. He passed away, Allah yarhamu. But this guy, blonde hair, blue eyes, I think he literally dated every woman on the North Shore. It had nothing to do with Islam, nothing at all, right? And I remember going to him in 2014 saying, "Brent, I need to pick up a phase 1. He said, yeah, sure. I said, no, I've got to tell you the whole story. I'm going to go for a month. I need it for a month. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to Iraq. And this guy nearly had a coronary. He's like, you want to do what? So to hire that camera for that length of time was going to cost $30,000.
Yeah.
Right. So we had a chat amongst ourselves. We found a possible pathway to sort of get those funds. So we went to him. I said, look, we can get the funds. However, we're not going to give them to you in a lump sum. We want a payment plan over a year, but we want to take the camera. He said, where are you going? I said, Iraq. He said, why? I said, there's something called the Arba'in. I said, just Google it. So this blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aussie guy, nothing to do with Islam, nothing to do with any religion really, doesn't call me back. Right?
Okay.
So 3 days before we're about to travel, I thought, look, man, this is not the time to be shy. Just jump in the car, head down there and see what's happening. So I jump in my car, get down there, get to Artarmon, open the door, and there's a bag on the right-hand side of the door with my name on it. And I looked at him, I said, what's going on? He said, I was waiting for you to call me. I said, you were going to call me. Why would I be calling you? He said, well, it's ready. I said, I know you've got the camera, man, but we need to work out this payment thing.
Yeah.
Now, this is all very polite company, so I can't tell you exactly what he said. But he told me, in essence, to pick up the camera and go away.
Yes, I get the gist of,
Right.
I can fill in that gap. Yep.
And I said, what do you mean? He said, just take it and go.
Subhanallah.
Yeah. So leading on to 2015, 2014, this kid got into a serious trouble with his dad. Like, what do you mean you gave away a $30,000 rental?
Wow.
So I wanted the camera the next year. So I rang him up. He said, mate, don't even talk to me. Ring my dad. He's not going to give it to you. I said, look, let me just call him. And by that stage, we published, that was the first publication I ever made of a photographic essay called Heaven to Heaven.
MashaAllah.
And beautiful hardcover coffee table book, beautifully done.
MashaAllah.
And so I took a copy and I went there. And I opened the door and I stepped inside and I stepped into water about that deep. That had a burst water main inside the building.
Ooh.
And all of his cameras were on the floor. And they had drowned. Camera and water
That makes
do not get along.
Poor guy.
Right? So I walked in and I nearly cried, I swear to God. I was just looking, I said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. He said, it's all right, mate. It's all insured. Anyway, who the hell are you? What do you want? I said, I'm the guy that you really don't like very much. And he stopped and he thought, and he said, you're Tom. I said,
He knew you.
He knew I was. He said, well, what do you want? He said, well, they're drowned. He said, I wasn't going to give it to you anyway, but there's nothing to give. I said, no, I can see that. And I said, look, I'm really sorry. And by the way, here's the book that we published last year. And he put it down on the table and he flicked through. He said, how many lenses did we give you last time? I said, you only gave me one. He said, you can't go do work with one lens. I said, well, it's all right. You did the job and we did all right. He said, no. He said, stay here for a minute. And he walked out back and he's on the phone. And I'm thinking, this guy's calling his insurance company. He's must be on a different planet.
Yeah.
He said, when are you traveling? I said, what? He said, when are you traveling? I said, in about a week. He said, oh, no, I can't do anything. I said, well, that's fine. I thought we already established that. And he said, just wait a minute. It's like he's talking to himself,
He's talking himself into it.
Yeah. And then he hung up and he said, this whole nonsense about you using one lens, that's disgraceful. He said, come back next week, pick up the camera and take it. I've got 3 lenses for you.
Wow, mashallah.
And I was just like...
Tabarak min Allah.
So anyway, we got to Karbala. And I took the most iconic photograph I've ever taken. Like, when I die, I think they're sort of going to say, God, he's ugly and there's not much going for him, but he took that one.
Yeah.
At least it's just one of the most iconic images I've ever taken in my life. And it is just quintessentially Arabic.
MashaAllah.
And I remember sitting with Sayyid Mahdi al-Mudarrisi in the Hussainiyya of Sayyid Hadi al-Mudarrisi. And Sayyid Mahdi is sitting next to me and he's like, go and show my dad. Go and show my dad. I'm like, all right. So I picked up the camera. It's $117,000 worth of camera.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the thing looks like a rifle. It's this big, right?
Wow.
So I walk over to Sayyid Hadi and I had that image. I'd already taken that image and he was on the CCD on the back.
Yeah.
And I said, Sayyidina, can I show you this? And he looked at it and he was so thoroughly unimpressed.
Really?
Oh, he just looked at it and he's like, yeah, no, this is good. And Sayyid Mahdi is like, tell him how much the camera is. And I'm like, oh, and Sayyid, this is a $117,000 camera. And Sayyid Hadi is just looking at me as if to say, God, when is this guy going to go away? He was just unimpressed. He's like,
you put your heart and soul into it.
And I'm really starting to feel like an idiot. Yeah. I got one Sayyid on one side saying, and the other Sayyid is like, and then all of a sudden, Sayyid Hadi stands up. And Sayyid Hadi, he's just got this gravity about him, and he stood up and grabbed me by the wrist, and it was like a vice.
Yeah.
And before I knew it, I'm walking up these stairs. And you know that the Husseini is directly opposite the shrine. And we come out onto a balcony. And Sayyid Hadi says to me in Arabic and English, he says, I don't think you know where you are. I said, no, I'm sure I do. He said, no. And you seem very surprised about things and how things happened for you. I said, well, they're pretty interesting things. I mean,
this story is enthralling. I can't wait for the next sentence.
And he just says to me, that's Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And anything can happen when it's for Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam.
SubhanAllah.
And I felt about that big.
SubhanAllah.
You know? And I remember walking back inside after all this had happened. And he actually said to me, he said, have you made your niyyah yet? And I said, yes, of course. I made my niyyah before I came. He said, no. Have you made your niyyah yet? And I said, what niyyah? He said, 40 ب40. So I'm not very smart, so I'm trying to work out what that means. And he says, you'll come to the 40 times.
SubhanAllah.
I've done 10, so we're still going.
Inshallah, leaders like the remaining 30.
And this is the thing, like to him, he was so unimpressed because this is the barakah of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Yeah. Why are you so surprised? You should be surprised that this is all that's happened to you. And this is what a lot of people don't realize about that ziyarah.
And that's in this world. Imagine the barakah in the akhirah as a result of that.
You're going to make me cry because I remember I was doing a charity auction not that long ago. And I always try to think of what to say about these particular images. And I have a photograph of Dharih Abu Fadl Abbas alayhi salam. And it's a beautiful, beautiful image, and it's very powerful. And I was trying to think of something, and I'm not a very articulate person. And I just stopped, and I looked out, and I had tears streaming down my face, and I said, this is where the angels come to cry. And that's what it was like. You know, this is the profundity of these places. You know, you want to try to describe in human terms what these places are, but these places are beyond human.
Beyond language.
So I take photographs of places where the angels come to cry.
Wow.
And I look at a lot of my photographic contemporaries, amazing craftsmen. And I feel so sorry for them that they just don't have this subject matter to go and photograph. Because they're still fixated on this beautiful tree and this beautiful mountain and this beautiful seaside. Or even the ones that tell very sort of powerful political and philosophical stories. And I just think to myself, is it possible that a nobody like me has cornered this particular part of things? And of course I haven't, because there's so many people that go out and do this great work, and I know so many of them.
But I think Allah has chosen your skills for something.
I can't pretend to know how to speak to that. All I can say is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is incredibly generous, because He's given the least of all of us the most opportunity, and I really don't know how to. I don't know how to articulate that.
I think that it's a genuineness about it, and the way you articulate that story and your emotion in it, I think that speaks a lot to why Allah has chosen you.
I can't speak to that, Hajj, and I always think, and I like to write sometimes. And I remember sitting down once and I wrote a bit of prose, and I concluded that bit of prose with, is that it, Talal? Is that all you did? With all of that, that's all you did? And it's something that always it chips away at my heart, because there's so much that needs to be done with this work. We've tried. It's not to say that we haven't tried. But I think going back to what you and I were discussing before about how the youth and how people meant to approach this sort of work, I'm not interested in being the best. And I'm not interested in having my name up in lights to say, I mean, I'm a very vain person, I can promise you that. And I love compliments, and I'd be a liar if I said otherwise. But now I know it's not the objective. And I always say, to people that are doing this work, it's not about being the best. It's about being your best, giving your best, giving everything. If you walk away from that equation thinking, I could have probably done a bit better than that, then that is a failed exercise, and it has only succeeded by the grace of God. And we can't take credit for God's work.
SubhanAllah.
We can take credit for our own work, and that's fine. But don't sit back and do a half-baked job and then marvel at the profundity of the work, because, well, the profundity didn't come from you. It didn't come from me. It came from the work. The barakah of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very generous to those that even pretend, like I do, to be on a significant path in that work.
SubhanAllah. Feek al-baraki, Hajj. And I think it's important to recognize the fact that, you're at the very minimum trying.
I hope so.
And I think as a community, as a follower of Ahlul Bayt and lover of Ahlul Bayt, all of us in our community need to at least give it a go in a similar way that you've done. And I think if we can, aspire to be, a little bit better at what we're doing and doing it as much as we can to the best possible quality we can, I think us as a ummah will rise, inshallah.
I remember sitting in a similar setting and having conversation with somebody for a podcast, and they said, Tom, what's your greatest aspiration when it comes to this work? I said, I'm really looking forward to the day when some 16-year-old kid walks up to me and says, Tom, geez, you're bad at this. I could do this better with my eyes closed. And I would want to look at that kid and say, mate, take my camera and go for it.
Yeah.
Because these narratives, these stories, the richness of this tradition is bigger than any one person. Yeah. It's bigger than all of us put together. And I think in coming years there's going to be some really, because there is an awakening to this work now.
And it is a growing attendance, isn't it?
The attendance, and also the idea that it's not good enough to go to the Arba'een as a Za'ir. The goal is to go to the Arba'een and be Khadim al-Zawar. And to me, that's my favorite part of the Arba'een. Yeah. I mean, I remember in 2014-15, it was all about the documentary, and we were very engrossed in that. And then 2015, the project ended, right? But I couldn't stop. I had to go back, and I changed it. So I developed an idea called the Portraits of the Arba'een, with the encouragement of a very dear brother of mine, and I really want to talk about this guy in a second.
Yeah.
And I said, all right, I want to have a mawkib. I want to do a mawkib on Mashaya. And for those that don't know, a mawkib is a stand, and a stand that offers services. So either food, water, shelter, massage, stitching of somebody's jacket. I had a trolley that broke down, which somebody welded for me on the Mashaya.
SubhanAllah.
Right? And I thought, okay, I can't take food, I can't take water, I can't sew, I can't weld. I'll set up a photography studio on the Maqam, on the Mashaya. And for 3-4 years, I set up the same mawkib at the same pole. And like I said, I've shot nearly 115,000 portraits that people have been able to take from all over the world and have as a memory of their experience in the Arba'in.
Yeah.
So for me, being a khadim of the Zawar is the greatest title that I can hope to aspire to. And I think once people go, they realize that's what they want to be. Not just a Zar. Khadim of the Zawar.
Subhanallah. Yeah. Subhanallah. That's a powerful message. And I think that's a message we can take in all our daily actions as well.
Absolutely.
Our ibadi and our amal is all in khidmi.
Ahsant. And, enabling, empowering, encouraging. One of my favorite thinkers, a guy that I actually got to meet, funny enough, Christian thinker, theologian, but predominantly academic. A guy by the name of Professor Cornel West. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
I've heard of him. I've not read any of his material.
He's spectacular.
Yeah.
Right? And he starts off every single lecture by saying, I am who I am because somebody loves me, somebody cares for me, somebody attended to me. And I got to meet him once, and I said, Professor, I think that's incomplete. And he said, well, and he comes from the Black Civil Rights Movement of the United States. A beautifully powerful figure, this guy. And the greatest orator, hands down, of our generation. When you hear this guy lecture, oh my God, he's just fire. He's brilliant, right? And he said, oh, tell me, brother, tell me what, complete the sentence for me. And I said, I am who I am because somebody loves me, somebody cares for me, somebody attended to me. Now, who's going to say that about me?
Subhanallah. That's a nice addition.
It's nice to say that, I am because everybody's helped me, but who's going to say that about me?
Yeah.
Is the guy that came to me, or the brother or sister that came to me and said, Tom, can you help us on this? And I say, I'm sorry, this is my thing. You go find your own thing. Come in.
Yeah.
Let's go. What are your ideas? How can we set them in motion?
Pass that torch on.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Keep the fire and the love alive.
Absolutely. And enable, actually physically enable. There's a brother of mine. I don't want to embarrass him, but I will.
Feel free. Feel free.
His name is Ali Al-Hajj. Just one of the most beautiful young men I've ever met. Just
MashaAllah.
Incredibly active, incredibly potent, fierce. And I remember I encouraged him to go and do some photographs for Muharram at one of the Islamic centers. And I said to him, I said, look, I want to teach you something, and I want you to go and apply it there. So it's a very sort of intricate lighting technique.
Okay.
And it's, I'm sort of obsessed with shadows. I love darkness. Because I think the darker something is, the more profound the light that comes out of it is. And I showed him this technique. I said, Ali, I want you to maybe set this in motion and see what you come up with. So this kid goes off, sets up these lights, and he's taking shots. And he came back to me. I said, how did you go? He said, I think they're good. I said, let's have a look. So imagine, and I want to try to sort of paint a picture for you, but so you imagine an image that is backlit, so the light's coming from behind, so everything is black, everything is dark, you can't see any facial features.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
But you can see the hands up in the air, and the brother was doing Lotham so hard that his sweat was bouncing off him. Now, when something is backlit, it catches all of those sweat droplets. So all you can see are these hands coming down and sweat like a halo around this guy's head. One of the most cracking photographs I've ever seen. And because he's such a scumbag, he actually took 3 incredible photos, not one. So he just wanted to really show me up.
Subhanallah.
So I looked at that and I thought, no, this is magic. I said, all right, hang on to those. And when I did the exhibition in Parliament in 2022, I left a vacant wall for him and I said, come and hang those images at this exhibition.
SubhanAllah.
So his first showing, his first exhibition ever was at the New South Wales Parliament House. That's really saying something.
That is absolutely. That is absolutely.
So,
and I think it's a testament to your, inspiration to him as well.
Well, I mean, I hope so. I'd like to think that I inspired him, but I think there's more to it than that. I mean, you can inspire as much as you want.
Yeah.
But it still requires somebody to get up and do something.
Well, that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
They say that you can't motivate people. You can only provide the environment for them to self-motivate.
I couldn't agree with that more.
And so it's okay, the inspiration is there, but is the drive there from within the heart?
Absolutely.
And it comes down to the intention. It comes down to the purity of that intention.
Absolutely.
And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will.
And the willingness to put in the work.
Absolutely.
Well,
it wouldn't be classified as work. If the intention is there and the love is there, it is a passion, it is a crime of passion. It is a driver that will, you cannot exist without it.
To me, I always look at these things, and when I do teach, one of the first concepts that I try to instill in people is that photography and art in general is a tree of 2 branches. One is the technical and one is the creative. One without the other doesn't work. You can be the most technically proficient photographer or artist in the world, but if you don't have any ideas, you're not doing anything. And you can have the greatest ideas in the world, and if you don't know how to photograph them all, then it's not going to work. So the work that I'm talking about is getting yourself to that proficiency and saying, right, I've got the craft to be able to enact these images. And I use the word enact purposefully because it is a process. You actually have to do it. You have to enact it, put it into play, and then watch the machinations of it. And people look at an image and they think, okay, this is a one photograph, a still image. But what went behind that?
Yeah, there's a lot that went behind it. And I think that we've often spoken on this podcast around Islam, and particularly the Shia being a religion of action.
Yes.
And I think what you've said there is a distilled way of communicating that any a'mal, any ibadi, has those 2 branches.
Absolutely.
You need to know what the knowledge of the worship, and then you've got the passion and the drive of the worship and the genuine intention behind that worship.
I think that's
and then once you combine those 2, that's when you call elegance and the peak of ibadi.
I think you've described that beautifully.
And I think, if we as a community can drive our youth and drive ourselves to pass on that level of dedication and being, khaddam for our Imam and for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and drive to be excellent in all that we do.
Sure.
It'll elevate us all.
Absolutely. And like I said, it's not about being the best.
No,
it's about doing your
all
best.
of us driving up.
It's about doing your best.
Absolutely.
As an individual. It's a bit of a sidetrack, but I get so annoyed with people that come up and say, why doesn't Sayyid so-and-so do more of this? And why doesn't Sheikh so-and-so do more of that? And my response to them is, why don't you do it?
That's exactly right. How many times we've had that driver? We get people with ideas around, why don't we have XYZ function at the mosque?
Yeah,
go for it.
Go for it.
Make the invitation. And you need funding. You need whatever. Let's arrange it for you. But you drive it.
It drives me mad because I think to myself, okay, the first showing that I ever did of the photographs that I've taken were probably to about 4 people. Right? I mean, people think that, you go out and take these images and now all of a sudden they're going to be on an international platform and everybody's going to see them. No.
No.
All right. So this whole concept of changing thousands and thousands of people's lives is a pipe dream. All right. There was one guy that was talking to me about, why don't Islamic centers do tutoring services? I said, that's a great idea. I said, why don't you do it? He said, I can't afford it. I said, look, it probably costs about $60 a week to get a tutor for one kid. Why don't you get a tutor for one kid, not related to you? Now, you know what he did when I said that? He hung up in my face.
SubhanAllah.
Yeah? Now, it's not me being holier than thou, and it's not me being saying, look, wow, what a brilliant way of thinking Tom has. No, it's about saying all of us need to acquire that. What am I trying to say? That self-purpose, right? I can't change what anybody else does. I can change what I can do. I can enact my own ideas, even if it's on a microscopic level.
I think, with and a good example of that, we do Dua Nutba at the Imam Mahdi Mosque with Sayyid Hassan Madarsi as our Imam. And when we first started that, we had, nobody, we had a lot of resistance. We'll keep it respectful.
Right.
And we had a lot of, don't do this and don't do, a lot of ideas about how, but no one really sort of wanting to really participate. And subhanAllah, with the Sayyid's guidance, and he's got a hard nose, the Sayyid. He knows what he wants and where to drive it to and so on. And so we've got it, we've got the breakfast down packed. The Sayyid hardly touches the mic now. We've got so many volunteer people to do the du'as and to do all of these things. And it's truly a community thing where I want to get involved. So they'll go sit there. And then once the first person finishes reciting, they'll hand the microphone over. Then the second person, we don't ask them to do it. When we do the breakfast, the shabab bring out the mat. They bring out the food out of the kitchen. We don't ask them to do that, not all the time. and even now, we've gotten to the stage where cleanup is happening without us saying, as soon as the Sayyid's father, Sayyid Ali al-Asghar, Madarasi, starts reciting, the dua for the morning at the end of the breakfast, the shabab, they all know. They stand up, they start cleaning up, everything gets done. And it's kind of, you look at that and you think, out of all of the programs I've been a part of over the past 2 years that I've been down here, I've been here 5 years, but 3 years of that was COVID lockdown.
Sure.
But in the past 2 years of my active involvement, that's been the most successful.
Right.
And it's grown every year. And it's at 4:30 in the morning.
Yeah, right.
Where all of the other programs have been at very convenient times and very convenient locations with, all of the, from the outside of it, the look and feel is all there. But the passion, the intention, everyone getting involved and everyone picking up and just being, and
it's
doing.
It's participatory.
Yeah.
And I think that's, people feel very much associated when they can participate in something.
Yeah.
Right? I just don't think people... Look, I'm a bit of a lecture junkie, so I love lectures. I love to just... I know you won't be able to tell from looking at this, but I love to shut up and just listen, And I loved... For me, it's very cathartic. It's very... It just puts me in a good place. I'm a little bit ADD, so for me, some sort of repetition is a good thing for me, right? But more often than not, people want to participate. They want to feel like they belong to something.
Yes.
And you don't belong by sitting there and doing nothing and just listening and then walking home.
That's right.
Right?
Getting here's your sausage sizzle. See you
Absolutely.
later.
So... Yeah. God bless you. I mean, if this is the...
It's all the same.
But I mean, if this is what you guys have been able to do, then thank God for it.
Well, look at us here.
Yeah.
We're 2 months now, Ali? 2 months now? All volunteers.
Wow.
And we've got a team of how many? 8 youth, young guys. I think Ali, you're the oldest one of the volunteers, or your brother? You're the oldest one. But you're still young. Subhanallah. May Allah irzak a wife, inshallah, soon.
2, inshallah.
And it's all the young guys, they're driving. Ali's done, this is all set up with Ali's help, and a couple of the other guys are doing the recordings and all of these things. The Sayyid and I were just sort of go for it.
Yeah.
You know,
if I can just make one suggestion, and I think the reason why I say this is because I've experienced it firsthand a great deal. A lot of the guys that are volunteering to do this work are bloody brilliant. Excuse me, they're very brilliant at what they do.
Absolutely.
And I think what we could perhaps look into is maybe somehow credentializing what they're doing so that it can appear on resumes, it can appear on CVs, it can actually give them a kick forward, because unfortunately, especially in these fields, experience is everything.
Absolutely key.
And you can be the most, you know, you can have all of the university degrees in the world, but the first thing they look at is your experience. So if you guys could, and I'm sure you already are, but if you can find a way of credentializing this experience, I think you'll do great things for them.
That's an amazing suggestion. And I think there is the intention as we grow and as we become more and more formalized in our roles and what we're doing.
Sure.
Absolutely. That is something we're definitely looking at. Speaking to your point around loving to participate and also having the opportunity to participate is important. I remember, again, I'm a newbie. So for me, all of this stuff is like amazing and new to me, like starry-eyed. We had a book fair. I'd never been to a Muslim book fair before.
Oh, right.
And so we did it. There was a book fair that was organized by Sayyid Hassan Mudarrisi at the...
is there anything he doesn't do?
Imam Ali College. He does everything.
Right.
He's everything. He's involved in a lot. SubhanAllah. We're blessed to have him.
God bless him.
So he, as part of his school, Imam Ali College, who's sponsoring us, by the way. So if you'd like to donate or you'd like to sponsor, please feel free. We'll leave the comments. We'll leave the credentials or the details in the comments below. It was someone he knew, and he organized a book fair, and we gave him a room as part of the school where he's at, and we had lines out the door.
Wow.
The guy was cleared out. He ran out of books.
Wow.
You know, he didn't have enough people then to sell. He didn't have enough machines to take the payments, and he didn't have enough stock to sell. It was just he was cleared out, and he had literally a room full of books. If you could imagine a classroom, from from all around, full, and we had multiple different rooms. I was there buying.
I'm sure you were there.
I was just turning up to buy some stuff.
Well, we just said it. It's all participatory.
And you had like rooms with like show bags. We had rooms with different things, and all of it sold out. All of it was cleared out. And I thought to myself at the time, like even the Sayyid was shocked at how busy it was, and I thought to myself, they're just waiting for something to participate
Absolutely.
in. And they just need that spark.
Absolutely.
And like anything, even this was simply a 2 or 3 second conversation in the car park after Salat al-Maghrib Isha, after Sayyid had come back from London doing a presentation over the Ashura season in London. And we were just talking in the car park.
Yeah.
And then he asked for something. Like, oh, what do you reckon we'll find a place? I said, yeah, let's find a place. And then that was it.
Wow.
And then the next day, we started looking for an office, and one thing, two things, three things. 2 weeks later, we had this set up. It wasn't as nice as this. Oh. I'll admit that. It wasn't as nice as this.
I came at the right time, obviously.
You did.
Right,
there's a peak of eloquence. But alhamdulillah, with Allah and pure intention, subhanallah,
it just happens.
Yeah, and for me, this is my first couple of years of experiencing the true miracle of what it's like to be not alone worshipping Allah, and doing it with others. I've thought about this sort of thing quite often, and I always think that this in itself is a form of rizq. And as you know, as we all know, rizq is not up to us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala determines rizq. However, God says, do you want to participate in that rizq? I mean, I sort of digress a little bit, but I mean, I sell a lot of my photos for Islamic causes, okay? And people are always so nervous. Centers, right? So they say, oh, but what if we don't sell them? And what if this doesn't happen? And what if that hasn't happened? And I'm like,
I didn't realize you were the conjurer of Rizq. That's God's department.
Subhanallah.
Right? Our department is,
What a way to look at it.
do it.
Yeah.
And if it works,
Don't let fear stop
great.
you.
And if it doesn't, it wasn't your Rizq.
Subhanallah.
Huh? And this is the thing. God simply gives us an opportunity to participate.
Yeah. It's a test.
You know, I'm no theologian, so I'm not going to give you any, but I love this story for Imam Ali alayhi salam. It's just one of my favorite and most applicable stories attributed to Imam Ali alayhi salam that I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Right? Imam Ali alayhi salam is in a tremendous hurry, and he's riding his horse to the masjid in Kufa. And he gets to the masjid in Kufa, and he alights the horse, and he grabs the reins, and he sees a man standing there, and he says, "Please hold on to my horse. I have to enter the masjid. There's something important." So the imam goes inside, comes back outside when he's finished. The horse is there, the man is gone, and the saddle is gone. The guy pinches Imam Ali's saddle, alayhi salam. Imam Ali alayhi salam grabs the reins and walks into the marketplace of Kufa. The first saddle store that he sees, there's his saddle. So Imam Ali alayhi salam walks over to the guy and says, "It's actually mine." He said, "Oh, Imam, a guy just came in and sold it to me right now." He said, no, that's fine. He said, "But just tell me something. How much did you give him for the saddle?" He said, "I gave him 2 dinar. He said, "Subhanallah, I was going to give him 2 dinar to hold on to my horse."
Subhanallah.
Wow.
Well,
it's going to come to you,
Yes,
but you choose. How does it come to
in a
me?
halal way,
Right.
or in a non-halal
How do I
way?
participate?
Yeah.
You know, I've loved that story from the first day I heard it. I sort of was just, I thought it was magic. You know, really, it's just up to us to participate. Rizq is God's department.
Absolutely.
Just work, just work, just do the work. You know.
Absolutely.
Anyway, sorry, that was
Tom,
my pretense at being a sheikh.
That was a very lovely story. Honestly, it has a lot of layering to it in terms of meaning as well.
Absolutely.
Allah yahmayk, khalina yak. Tom, I'd like to move on to some of the photos that that you've shared with us to just talk through them and give us your thoughts on them. And
sure.
You know, so the first photo we're getting up, I think it's called the Lantern of Guidance. Talk us through it.
I guess as well as looking at the imagery, I take a lot of time to conjure names for them. For the simple reason that I have a great affinity with these images. I used the word before, which I'll use again. I've nurtured these images.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So when one of the things that always strikes me about people's perceptions of my photographs is that a lot of people have been and yet never see the things that I've photographed. They simply walk through the space, not seeing, not looking. Now I can understand why. I mean, you're so emotionally frayed by the time you walk into the maqam that you're not really there on a sightseeing tour anymore. Mm-hmm. So this is Bab al-Qubla of the shrine of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam.
Subhanallah.
And I remember getting to the doors, and I tend to, when I photograph, I tend to walk in 2 directions. I walk forward and then I walk back, just trying to sort of, I guess, acclimatize my eyes to what is actually there. And with a lot of these photographs, I'm very, very fortunate in that I get to teach the photographers of the maqam of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, and in fact now all of the shrines. So I teach their in-house photographers. Wow. Right? Now a lot of them don't need my teaching. I can promise you that they're amazing with what they do. But they just, I think they shoot for different purposes.
Okay.
So I remember standing there with two of the guys from the media department of the Shrine of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them actually said to me, he said, "What are you standing here for?" And I'm like,
Don't you
"Are
see
we
it?
looking at the same thing?" And he's
Don't
like,
you see what I see?
and this is another thing really, because a lot of the people that spend a lot of time in Karbala, it's a horrible word to use, but they become acclimatized to it too much, and it becomes too second nature for them. So they tend to see less and less when they're there, because they experience it every day. So I sort of stood there, and I remember that, as you can see with this image, one of my mentors taught me very early on that it's not what makes you a good photographer is not what you include in an image, it's what you're clever enough to leave out of an image. So I stood there, and there was a lot of people walking right in front of me, and I had to be very particular with the angle of the camera so I can avoid as much of that as possible. So the more I lifted the camera up, the more I could see this beautiful bit of Iranian architecture that you can see up in the top third of the image.
Yeah.
And I remember just looking there thinking, my God, they look like lanterns.
They do.
And it was a very, and I don't mean this in a punny way, but they're illuminating to look at. And one of the tricks of photography, or one of the things that you really have to grapple with in photography, is cameras are not very smart. So even the really, really expensive cameras, like the ones that we use, they need your input. So cameras don't like when light in a particular image is too greatly separated. So really bright, really dark. It doesn't like that. It can't deal with that. So I remember tilting the camera up, and when those lights were on, there was a perfect balance between the light in the foreground and the light in the background.
SubhanAllah.
And I set that up. Now, this is what we call a long exposure.
Okay.
So this shot, believe it or not, the camera's open for about 16 seconds. Okay, so the camera's plump, and it's just absorbing light. So if any movement occurs near the camera, it shakes blurs. And it blurs.
Yes.
So I think it worked. But
it looks amazingly beautiful.
The amount of detail that they've been able to incorporate into the calligraphy and into the I always say that my work is artwork of artwork. So
that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. It's art on its own. It doesn't need my help for that.
SubhanAllah.
So it's really just my job to try to isolate some of those things.
Yeah. It's an amazing way to think of it. It's an appreciation.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I always say to people, I'm a photographer, I'm not a painter. Yeah. A painter has the ability to conjure things up that aren't there. I can't. All I can do is photograph what's there, but do it in a way which best represents it.
SubhanAllah. Yeah. You want to move to the next one? I love the depth of this one. It's like, if you look at it in a certain way, it's as if you're standing there looking at it in person.
Absolutely. There is an artistic concept called framing. So what you, in essence, want to do is try to place a frame around the most significant part of the image that you're trying to portray. And I remember sort of looking around me, and the incredible intricacies of the architecture that is now there just formed this beautiful frame around what is Bab al-Qubla. This is, again, Bab al-Qubla of Imam al-Hussein. And to tell you, in essence, the difference between this and the previous shot is about 6 meters. So I literally moved forward 6 meters.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. It's a whole new world.
Absolutely.
It looks like a whole new world.
And this was where one of my students was saying to me, "Oh, you're stopping here as well?"
Was this a long exposure shot too?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
It's kind of, I think, it looks like a whole new world. Honestly, it's an amazing photo.
So what this image really, I guess the principles that this image works on, and I'll get a little bit technical only because I'm hoping that there are some photographers watching this. So we're really interested in the depth of field here. We want to create depth within the image so that your eyes actually, a very good image is something that will draw you to a particular point.
Yes.
Okay, so you'll see here that the more you look at that image, the more that the focal point becomes that gold space right at the very, very back there.
Yes.
So your eyes are drawn to it.
Yes.
As well as enabling you to explore the peripheries of the image, but invariably you always go straight back down to the middle.
That's probably why you called it the gateway.
Well, to me, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, I mean, it's called the gateway specifically because I believe that we, the Shia, will enter heaven through the gate of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam.
Subhanallah, subhanallah.
And I think if there's any hope for any of us to enter heaven, it will be through that gate. Now, of course, I'm being metaphorical. I think Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam is the gate. I'm not saying that that's the gate to heaven there, but in my opinion, it is anyway. But Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam is a gate to heaven. And, of course, that gate has to lead through his father, who is the gate of the city of knowledge. So I don't think it was a long bow to draw to see how Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam could be the gateway.
Subhanallah. MashaAllah. Wow.
This image, I mean, you talk about luck, you talk about undeserved luck. This is on the birthday of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. It had rained, and I was the only person, and I say person specifically because I knew the angels were all around, but I was the only person on earth standing on that roof that day.
Subhanallah.
And it started to rain, and there's a funny video of me where it started to rain, and the camera is very expensive and it doesn't like water, so I had to take off my jacket and put it over the camera, and I was absolutely freezing because a lot of these images have to be taken in winter.
Yeah.
Cannot be taken in summer.
Because you get the clarity in the air.
Absolutely
and the
right.
sky color is a bit different in the winter.
You've said it perfectly. And so this is in relation to color temperature. So the colder the temperature, the colder the color temperature, the more vibrant the colors are. So in summer, especially in somewhere like Iraq, you get very hazy white skies. In winter, you get these incredible things. But what's going on here actually is rather interesting. And you can see that I've called it the conjurer because it almost seems something magical about it.
Coming out. It honestly looks like the lights are coming from the sky.
Absolutely right. So what's happened here is that it's a very overcast day. It had been raining. So you've got the really thick cloud, which is quite low, but then you had a very light cover of cloud above, and then the thick cloud separated. So it almost looked like there's lightning going across the two minarets and the dome.
Yeah, it looks like they're connected
right
via the sky.
Absolutely.
The
and
sky.
To me, it was like a conjurer. It's the wrong word to use, but it was like a wizard conjuring something. And to me, it was just very powerful. Supernatural.
MashaAllah. It's a beautiful shot.
Thank you.
Wow.
Well, this one...
the armor of faith. It has that strength to it.
It almost looks like a knight's helmet.
It does.
With say two lances on either side. It's very powerful. But I got to tell you, this is very much a one-off. So even the photographers of the Maqam who were there every day didn't know that you could get that angle.
Wow.
So I ended up crawling under some air conditioning ducts, as of course you do. And I came out just covered in dust. Oh, and it was just
a sacrifice for your love.
But I tell you what, subhanallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sometimes just just sets an idea in your mind and you think, I didn't really think of that. But for the first time ever, I'm very much a Puritan when it comes to photography. I'm a very old school photographer. So a lot of the photographers out now are very gifted in their ability to shoot video and shoot stills, and they sort of amalgamate the two ideas. I'm very much an old school photographer. So I know nothing about video, but I've got very good equipment, like really good equipment.
MashaAllah.
So I set up the phase 1 to take that image. So for those that don't know, phase 1 is not like Mercedes-Benz or BMW. It is the Bugatti of cameras.
Yeah.
Right? It is the real deal.
It is the proper rich.
It's,
not Insta-rich.
It's funny. I had to try to explain to somebody why it was so different. And I couldn't use the sports car analogy anymore because it just didn't make sense anymore. So in the end, I had to say to him, well, imagine taking a ute and going to work in the mines. You know those those massive trunks that they lump all the stuff onto and carries hundreds of tons of stuff or lots of tons of stuff.
Yes.
I said if they dumped that onto a ute, they'd crush it, right? But these trucks are purpose-built for that. So this is what this camera is all about. It is heavy lifting equipment. So anyway, I set up the phase 1. The phase 1, by the way, is something that we call a medium format camera. Mm-hmm. So most cameras that you see have something called a 35mm sensor, which follows in the tradition of film. So the film was a 35mm film. So when they created the sensor, they created it in 35mm. The medium format is called a 645 sensor, so it's about that big, right? About 5 times, 6 times the size of a normal sensor. Mm-hmm. And the camera that we're using there is a 100 megapixel camera.
Wow.
Right. So you might think, well, why is that important? Okay. It's ability to pick up detail. So
particularly if you enlarge it.
Absolutely. The more you enlarge it, the more you see.
Yeah.
So if there is an ant walking along the maqam and I enlarge that image big enough, you'd be able to tell if it was male or female.
Subhanallah.
All right. Wow. It's phenomenal stuff. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it's almost to that.
Wow.
Okay. So I set up the phase 1, and the phase 1 is what I use to shoot all of my big stills. The reason being is that I produce these images in very high quality at very large sizes. So that image there I can print. Well, the largest printer that I've got available to me at the moment is 120 by 180 centimeters.
Wow.
So 1.8 by 1.2. But it is pin sharp. So you will see the grout between the tiles. You'll see every minute feature.
I think your limitation is the printer's ability to do the quality.
Absolutely
rather than
right.
the camera.
Now, we're very lucky in that the printers that we use are some of the best in the world.
Wow.
So it's been a beautiful marriage.
MashaAllah.
Great images, great printing.
MashaAllah.
So, and I'm going to get to that reason why in a minute, but there's a very important, I think, story to tell about that. But just going back to this image, I set up the phase 1 to take that image, and I was there quite early, so there was still a lot of light in the sky. And right beside me, I set up my Nikon camera. Now, the Nikon Z9, which is what I use in 35mm gear, is the best 35mm camera in the world. It's the best. And I set it up, and for some reason that I cannot explain, I decided to set it up on video. I've never done that before. So I'm sitting there waiting to take this shot, and I'm waiting for the light to get right. And I thought, just switch on the video. So I did. And as soon as I switched on the video, the adhan comes up. And there was this individual with the most angelic voice I've ever heard, just doing this gorgeous adhan. And the flag is fluttering. And there's the maqam in there, and I've got the whole adhan as a backdrop to this image.
Oh my God.
And it's just,
wow.
1 in a trillion opportunity.
It's like, wow.
And there it was. And I went back, and I went back because the office that I sort of work from is in the maqam. So I went back, and all of the guys were sitting there, and they looked at me, and I was just covered in dust. And they're just sort of sitting there shaking their heads, thinking, this Aussie guy, honestly,
What's he doing?
what an idiot.
But then you showed them.
I didn't. I showed them after.
Wow, good.
Yeah, that one there, the armor of faith. I mean, it's just...
Says it all.
It does.
Really
it does. And armor is not an aggressive thing.
No,
it
it's
is
a protection.
Defensive thing. And Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam is our defense in a world that has treated him so horribly.
Yeah. Yeah. Subhanallah. We've also got the next one there, which is the...
So this is a similar motif. So you can see that I'm gradually progressing more and more forward. That's right.
Yeah.
And I guess that tells you that I'm not very smart, because I don't rely on the one shot. I want to keep going because I don't want to miss anything. So I will do things in a very sort of graduated way, in a very methodical way. It takes a long time to set up these shots, especially when there's thousands of people walking around you. But I'll tend to walk through because I just want to make sure that I never want to look at it and think, oh, I wish I had done that.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it.
Do it wholeheartedly.
Absolutely.
Not half-heartedly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's an amazing level of detail. This is an interesting one.
It is. So this is the outer wall of the shrine of Imam Ali alayhi salam.
The truth.
Aliyun ma'al haqq wal haqqu ma'ali.
Subhanallah.
And I just, as soon as I saw that, and this is I got to tell you this story.
This is a gold story.
This is where you sometimes have to, in fact, all the time have to learn to just put your ego aside. Yeah. A lot of the photographers that work in the shrine look at people that come from the outside reverentially. Oh, you're from Australia. Oh my God, you must be. And they don't realize that. Nah. Not really. We're just, Yeah. So I remember this kid, and he I think probably early 20s, and gifted. This kid was gifted. He knew how to take photos. And he came to me, and he kept calling me Ustad, and I hate when somebody calls me that. Ustad. I said, listen, man, just let's stop with that right now.
Just call me Tom.
Right? Just call me Tom. And then he said, do you mind if I point some things out to you that I've seen before? And I'm thinking, this kid is going to cut my workload down by 90%, because half the time is walking around trying to find things.
Yeah.
Right? And he just brought me here, and I as soon as I saw it, I lit up, and he lit up, and he's like, that was the first thing I wanted you to see. And then I just looked at him, and I actually kissed his forehead, because it was just there. It was just perfectly there.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just listen, pay attention to what other people are saying. Don't always think that somebody's trying to rain on your parade. Sometimes you get the best nuggets.
And it's the humility of it, like being humble around it. I remember years ago we were at a family barbecue. It's related. And there's a member of the family, just a guy. He's not necessarily known for his religiousness, right? It's just a guy. He's just sitting there and loosely related to us and whatever. And they were having this intense debate about religion and how to, what's the foundation, what's going to anchor you in the faith of Islam. And this guy just casually leaned over, he's got his little foldable barbecue chair, and he leaned over and said, it all starts with Salah. You get Salah right, everything else will fall into place. And then he went back and he's back to his Agili and that. And I remember, I would have been maybe 12. I remember looking at this guy, and he just hit me like a brick wall. I said, that is it. Because if you focus on Salah, you've got to be wadah. You've got to be physically pure. Therefore, and you need a place to pray.
Yes.
So where you are needs to be
matters.
Pure.
Right.
And what you eat and it's got to be pure. And what you're doing has got to be, and the intention, it's everything.
Absolutely.
And it builds up from there. And I think if I had an arrogant viewpoint of that this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He's not even religious. He probably doesn't even pray himself.
Absolutely.
Then I would have dismissed that comment.
Absolutely.
Potentially, like most of the people at that barbecue did,
Yeah.
because he was simply ignored and the conversation continued. But for me, it was just I just stopped and just stared at it. I'm like, wow, this is a nugget right there. And and look at me now. I'm till this day I still talk about it.
And why wouldn't you? I mean, it's absolutely right. It's absolutely right. I mean, God, I think in the story that you're telling, God wasn't testing that man. He was testing you.
SubhanAllah.
And we always think that the tests are happening to someone else, but they're not. I mean, let's look at what's happening in Lebanon at the moment. The test is not, I mean, they are being tested. Everybody's tested individually. But we're being tested. What are we doing? What has our response been? How have we contributed?
Mm-hmm.
That's our test.
Absolutely.
It's one.
Is your rizq more important than your commitment to your religion?
Absolutely right.
And this is the test for it now.
And that is the blueprint.
Yeah.
Because I think we are who we are because we have the great Imam Ali alayhi salam.
Ya Allah. SubhanAllah. This one's a very interesting photo. Where the lion rests.
I mean, for me, I remember I shot a series of images in 2014 of Imam Ali alayhi salam, of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, and of Abu Fadl Abbas alayhi salam. And I was being asked, I had to come up with a name for it for an exhibition that I was doing at the largest Anglican church in Australia in Melbourne.
Okay.
And I called it The Pride. And everybody had assumed that, that I meant that, Imam Ali is our pride. And I said, no.
Pride of lions.
The pride of lions.
Yeah.
And I always think of Imam Ali alayhi salam. I know that I think there's been some silly portrayals of the lionness of Imam Ali alayhi salam, which is disappointing to see. But Imam Ali alayhi salam is the genuine metaphorical lion of Islam. So when I think of his final abode on earth, it can't be anything but the lion's abode. Yeah. And this was photographed this year.
Yeah.
And it's funny, people think that, oh, Tom, you get given all this great access. Yes, that's been 10 years in the making, that shot. So that's the first year they've allowed us to go in and photograph.
MashaAllah.
Yeah.
MashaAllah. Wow.
And there he is.
Wow. The guardian of faith. That's breathtaking.
Well, I think
it's 3D, it's immersive. The sun in the background, the color in the sky, the way the white is offset, it pops out at you.
It reaches out for you. It's a very embracing image because it almost looks like he's coming out to greet you. But I remember when I was given permission to go up, and they're very particular about time. So it's not as if you can go up and stay up. You've got 15 minutes. So I'm like, all right, but it's not going to happen in 15 minutes. So I got up, and it was still quite early in the day, and I refuse to take a photograph unless the light is right. I won't do it. It reflects poorly on everybody. And if somebody sees a bad image, they may turn around and say, well, Tom's just a bad photographer, and I can live with that. But I won't have anybody say that the maqam doesn't look beautiful. I won't accept that. And I remember a few years ago, I asked permission to photograph Imam Ali alayhi salam, and they said, after much negotiating and much groveling and begging and pleas, and they finally said yes. And I said, okay, I'll come back tonight. And they're like, what? No, we're giving you time now. I said, no, I'm not going to take a photo now. And one of them said to the other guy, I think this guy actually knows what he's doing. And I left and came back. later on. But in this particular image, I got up on the roof and I could see the sun is about to set. And the thing is, people don't realize that we're talking minutes here. That's it. In a few minutes, all that's gone, right? And the greatest friend to a landscape photographer, which in essence is how you can sort of categorize this, is clouds. And you just don't get many clouds in Iraq most of the time.
Yeah.
So this was all happening. So I started running. And the guy that was up with me is like, look, man, we're going to give you the time, relax. And I'm like, it's not about that. And I'm bolting because I'd never been given that access before. So I didn't know where the angles were. So I'm literally running like a headless chicken trying to find my angle.
And you've got minutes before it's all gone.
Absolutely. And I went over to the left and I came back to the right and I went forward and went back and changed lenses and then finally I sort of settled on that and I think it worked.
It's a beautiful photo.
I think it worked.
This one's quite immersive as well. The Phoenix Fortress. Rising out of the ashes. Subhanallah.
So this is Al-Askariyain alayhi salam. And as I'm sure everybody knows, the decrepit ISIS decided to blow up the shrine. And they very much have now, they've rebuilt a great portion of it, especially the interior, but the exterior still has a long way to go. And we arrived without any expectations. I have a very good friend at the maqam of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam who's opened up a huge amount of doors for us. So he rang somebody who rang somebody who rang somebody who finally allowed us to actually have a meeting with the media office of the Askariyain. And I walked in and I said, look, can we I'd love to see some of your work. And we sat down and we did like a workshop with the photographers of there, and they had produced some beautiful stuff. But again, not for the purposes of what we do. So they're very much journalistic photographers. So it's very fast. They shoot at
Factual.
different settings. Yeah, this is what it is. This is what happened on this
photography.
day. Yeah.
Yeah.
So whereas with me, it's more art photography, and So I shoot very differently. So
and that's why they invoke emotion differently to someone who's just simply taking it as a
absolutely.
This is where a location.
And I'm constantly thinking of the final product. So I know what an image is going to print like before I've actually taken the photograph, which is very important for me because I'm an exhibition photographer. So that's really what I'm working towards. So anyway, I gave this workshop, and the workshop went for about 2.5 hours, and it was a very sort of to and fro, and the guys there were incredibly willing to learn and very generous with their thing. And when I was critiquing their work, I'm a very sort of I'm a very forensic critic of photography. I mean, that's kind of my education in the process. So I'm very good at nitpicking at things, and not to nitpick, but to sort of say, well, look, if you go back and do this shot again, you can really have something spectacular. And these guys were incredibly gracious and grateful. So when I was done, the head of the media office came up to me and he said, well, don't you want to take any photographs? I said, well, I was embarrassed to ask you, but he said, grab your gear. So
I love it.
I grabbed my gear and I went out. And it was Salah time, so we stopped and prayed. And straight after Salah, he says to me, there's too many people inside. Wait here. And he emptied the maqam.
Okay.
And he said, you've got 7 minutes. That's it. Otherwise, these people will kill us and you. So they emptied the place out, and I had full access.
Clarity. What a shot.
So the funny thing was I took that shot, and I took a series of shots. And then he said, oh, you haven't seen it from the women's side, have you? And I just went, no. And he said, well, let's go.
And
So
I'm assuming that was obviously emptied as
emptied
well.
out.
Wow.
And he gave me 7 minutes.
Wow.
And I had 7 minutes there, 7 minutes there. And it was just 7 minutes in heaven. It was just magical. Just magical.
It's clear to me this location holds a very special spot in your heart.
Oh, it's...
Your facial expression and your emotional reaction to this photo is different to the others. It's a lot more intimate, a lot more deep.
You know, the calamity of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam is something that we relive every single year. And we've done that for 1400 years. The calamity of Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam, it is said that were it not for the calamity of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, the calamity of Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam would be the cornerstone of Shia thinking. The calamity of Imam al-Askari alayhi salam is now. His shrine was blown up. People were killed because they wanted to go and visit him. His calamity is today. It's a bit hard not to... It's hard not to immerse yourself in that.
It is.
And
in a very genuine way.
I pray to God that there's a semblance of respect given to this image. I think, by me as a photographer, I hope that I've given it justice.
And I think the naming of it is quite deep and powerful as well. I think you've really captured something special.
I hope so.
You really have.
I hope so. And God bless you. Thank you.
Allah yahmak Hajj.
Allah yahfadak.
You've enriched us
Allah
with your
yahfadak.
work. We really have.
Allah yahfadak. Allah yahfadak. This is, I guess, one of those more technical sort of photographs.
Yeah.
This photograph is about an hour and a half in the making.
Wow.
So we arrived. I've always got chaperones with me, so there's always people there from the shrine to stand beside me because I'm not allowed to just walk around willy-nilly with a camera. And one of the brothers was like, haven't you taken the photo yet? I'm like, no, I haven't. And he's like, well, what are you waiting for? I'm like, well, it was too bright in the sky. So the light in the sky was way brighter than the light inside.
And that's going back to what you were discussing before, right. that the two
There's got to be that balance.
Yes.
So I had to sit. I literally sat there for about an hour and 15 minutes. And
just
then finally...
you got the right. Yeah.
And there you can see the minarets and you can see... I mean, that water pouch is just...
Yeah, it's as if it's floating midair.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's drawing you in.
Absolutely.
And you know what? When I look at it, I get thirsty.
Yeah, absolutely.
Subhanallah.
Yeah. This is a...
It's a gorgeous...
This is an oldie but a beauty. This was taken in 2014.
It almost makes me feel like a defiant victory with the hand up, you know?
Absolutely. But
the pillar.
It's
very beautiful.
I had taken another photograph before I'd taken this one. And the guys that were with me, we all took solemn promises that we wouldn't take... that we wouldn't be up there doing things for us, right? So no selfies, no things, and I'd always sort of respected that, and I never contravened that sort of those wishes of the custodians. But I remember they, after being on the roof, they said to two of the brothers, they said, "Go and touch the dome." And I remember just freaking out, thinking, "Man, you're about to touch the dome." And I had all the gear set up, and as you can see, it's at that perfect light moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is twilight. So the sunset, there's still a little bit of fragrance of the light in the sky. And because the lights on the maqam are on, there's that beautiful sort of symbiosis that's happening there.
Aura in the background.
Absolutely. So I was taking another shot on another camera, and I've always got a couple of cameras handy, and I just picked up this camera, and as the boys were walking over, I just went click, and I just sort of nailed it from there, and I didn't even pay any attention to it. I knew it was a nice shot, but I didn't think it was one of the real keepers.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I come back to Sydney and I looked at it and I thought, oh, God, what a shot.
The pillar. SubhanAllah. What a beautiful photo. This almost looks like post-production shot. You know, it's got just the value in it. You just look at it, and it strikes you right in the heart. The holy sacrifice.
This photograph is a great testament to my ignorance.
Why? Why do you say that?
Imagine being amongst the greatest diamond miners in the world, with all the skill in the world and all the capacity to find things where other people simply can't. And imagine a nobody walking past and just happens to trip over the largest diamond ever found, right in the midst of all of these other miners, and he just holds it up and says, is this a good one?
SubhanAllah.
I stood on a platform on the other side of the maqam. Normally, now this was shot on my Nikon. At the time I was shooting on a Nikon D3. D3, good camera, but back in the day, it was the best camera of its day, but low megapixels. So I think it was about 12. Oh no. 12 megapixel. And I was shooting with the big camera, but something about that just kept bringing my attention back. So I shot it, turned, shot it again, turned, shot it again, and I just kept cracking away at this one thing. I don't ever normally do that.
Yeah, because all of your other photos you've described are very analytical, patient.
Absolutely. Considered, I know exactly what I'm photographing, and when I'm done, I'm done.
Yeah.
This
like
one
you're
I'm
searching for something.
just hammering away at it. My eyes just kept coming back. My eyes kept coming back. I'd look away, and then my eyes would come back to it, and I'd photograph it again. I had no idea what I had. So I had an exhibition in 2015. Big exhibition. So that was the Heaven to Heaven exhibition. We had about 3,000 people show up to this exhibition.
Wow.
So I'm standing there and I can see all of the people there, and a young Sayyid comes up. Young, I'd say probably 23, 24 years old. Never met him, don't know who he is. So I walked up to him and I said, Sayyid, do you mind if I show you around? Arrogance coming through. These are my photographs. And I show him around, and he's walking past them and he's sort of nodding and almost the look of boredom on his face. And then he arrives at this image and he stops and he just explodes into tears. And I'm not talking about crying. I'm talking, imagine a baby that is doing that.
Yeah.
And he's crying and crying and crying and crying. And the only thought coming into my mind was, what have I done? Have I done something wrong? Have I
said something, done something?
And I'm trying to, I was almost going to shake this guy. Like, just what is going on here? And he's like, can't you read Arabic? I said, I actually can't. My Arabic is not very good. المذبح المقدس. The very place where Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam is beheaded. And this guy was just, and I froze. I was shell-shocked. And he just looked at me, and he kept looking. He's crying, he's bent over, he's crying so much. And then he just says, Assalamu alaikum ya Aba Abdullah, and he just storms out. And I've never seen him since. I've got no idea who he is. And it's just a testament to my ignorance. But it taught me a great lesson about fitrah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts this innate thing into all of us.
Yeah.
And just makes us gravitate towards things. I've got maybe 7 or 8 shots, different incarnations of this shot in my catalogue. I just kept going back, click, 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 click. And I had no idea why.
And it goes back to what you said earlier. Some people go there, they don't know where they are.
No, they don't.
And Allah, you felt it in your heart, even though in your mind you didn't have it.
I couldn't correlate what it meant.
Yeah, it was just there.
Yeah.
And it was just drawing you towards it.
It's I think in my mind, that's probably one of the most profound images I've ever taken.
SubhanAllah. It is very beautiful. And it's very powerful.
I mean, this image to me is all about.
This is
aesthetic.
an emotional roller coaster. You go from deepest to this. This is like vibrant, bright happiness. It's almost like you want to be. You want to touch it.
Absolutely.
You're almost there. You can touch it. That's what it feels. Despite it where it is, you know what I mean. It hits you somewhere where you feel like.
I mean, I guess that's the name.
I can't read that name. It's too small.
The light and the darkness.
The light and the darkness. There you go. If I have
because I mean, this world would be so dark without the Ahlul Bayt.
Yeah, the Nur, absolutely.
They are the light. They are the. I mean, we always Allah Subhanahu wa Taala tells us to ask Him for Sirat al-Mustaqim. But the Sirat al-Mustaqim has to be lit for us in order to be able to see it.
There it is.
There it is.
SubhanAllah. How did you were the lights that color on the day, or was that a result of, the light playing with a certain atmospheric sort of...
Very good question. And this is where I have monumental arguments with other photographers. I am not a journalistic photographer.
Okay.
I'm an art photographer. And I will show you an image based on the emotional outpouring that it gives me. So now I'm not a Photoshop guy. So this is not about post-production manipulation. That's not about, I don't, the limitations, and this has always been sort of an ethical limitation that I've placed on myself. I come from the school of film photography. So dark rooms and, chemical sort of processing. So I limit the amount of Photoshop that I do based onto the limits that I used to be able to do in chemical processing. So I don't believe in altering images in post-production. So the reason why these colors appear the way that they do is that I've altered the color temperature of my sensor on the camera.
Okay.
So and I don't want to get too technical, but for those that are interested, so daylight is 5,600 degrees Kelvin, right? So the lights that are being used on the maqam tend to fluctuate between neon and LED. So they fluctuate anywhere between 5,600 degrees Kelvin and about 3,300 degrees Kelvin.
Okay.
So I have to set a color temperature for the camera in order to be able to process that. All right, the camera can't deal with it on its own. It can, but it's very bad at it. Even the best cameras are really because you're asking the camera to interpret what you think, and it can't do that.
No.
Right? So I've told the camera here that actually the color temperature is about 3,000. So I've cooled the color temperature down. So that's why, because otherwise it's because of the heat of the light that's coming onto the maqam from the external lights, it goes excessively orange, and I don't like that. I love the coolness of being there.
And that's where you get the darker contrasts onto the golds, particularly on the pillars.
That's right. And that's why you also get a lot of that purple hazing that's coming through.
Yeah, that's right.
So this is the color temperature cooling to an extent that it's giving off more sort of the blue spectrum of light.
Okay.
Yeah, as opposed to the red spectrum of light.
It looks amazing.
Thank you.
That's beautiful.
So how many hours do we have?
Plenty of time. Plenty of time. I think we'll probably finish up on the description of this one.
Okay.
But I think this is another one of the... you've been teaching me and I've been trying to learn. So would this, in my interpretation, would this be another framed photo? Similar to the one you did, the second one. You did not the third when you went really close. So with this one, and I'm simply saying this to you as an emotional reaction because I have no idea about photography, but I feel...
You seem to know pretty... You actually seem to be very knowledgeable.
I'm just emotional speaking, but looking at it, it gives me a similar room feeling as the other photo. I feel like I'm immersed in it, like as if I'm looking at it inside, and it's like a sneak peek into something. Even though it's far away, it's actually close.
The thing about this image is, or the style of this image, is I'm giving you the pretense of choice. You feel like you have a choice of looking anywhere at this image, but I'm forcing you to look straight through. Right?
Yeah.
Now, remember I told you there was an image that the story of which can be told in two different ways for two different audiences, right? To my Shia audience, I got to Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam in 2016, in the height of the war, and I got there because of a Christian priest.
Interesting.
A guy called Father Dave Smith.
Okay.
I love this guy to death. He's a beautiful man. And he rang me. You're going to have to forgive me, but I've got to tell this story in the only way that it makes sense to me. And
My friend, be yourself.
And I'm still trying to work out how to make sense of it. I really, really am.
Be yourself, absolutely.
So a month before that image, I was contacted by a friend of mine who said, would you like to get access to photograph at Imam Rida alayhi salam? I said, you don't have to ask me twice. He said, all right, I'll get you there and I'll get you access.
Inshallah.
We were all set to go. A week before we were supposed to fly out, his son is injured in Lebanon. I'll leave that there.
Yeah.
He rings me up. He says, I'm really sorry, I can't take you. I'm going to go see my son. I sat in my backyard and I cried. I was just devastated. And I'm sitting down and my wife just sort of left me alone. And all of a sudden my phone rings. And it's Father Dave Smith. And I'm thinking, God, I just don't want to talk to you now, Father. I really don't. But al-ta'ib.
Yeah.
I start off every conversation with him. Salam, Father. He says, wa alaikum as-salam.
Wow.
He says, Tom, I'm sorry I'm calling you such last minute, but I'm doing this guy is, by the way, just as a bit of context, he is the oldest professional boxer in Australia.
Wow.
So he does refugee programs, homeless programs through boxing, right? He says, Tom, I'm doing a refugee outreach program, and would you be our photographer? I said, sure, Father. I said, where? He said, we're going to Syria. And I went, what? He said, yeah, we're going to Syria. I'm thinking, what's this guy talking about? I said, Father, do you know what's happening in Syria at the moment? He said, Tom, that's why we have to go. There are kids there that need to see some sort of light at some sort of tunnel, at the end of some sort of tunnel. And I said, Father, I'll go, but I've got a condition. He says, I know what your condition is. I'll get you to say it as Zainab, inshallah. His exact words, verbatim.
Wow.
This guy is very close to us.
Yeah.
10 days later, we're on a plane. Now, Father, Hajj, I'm in Arabic what you would call zinakh. I just am. I'm always joking around. I'm always, right? So for the whole trip, I'm either in stitches or have everybody else in stitches, and we're just having a big laugh.
Yeah.
And then Father Dave comes up to me and he says, tomorrow. I said, what? He said, tomorrow. Hajj, we start driving down, and the vicinity of Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam is empty. It is derelict. There is nobody there. And we get to the outskirts and I just start crying. I'm going to see Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam. I've never been. So everybody just left me alone. I was just, khalas. We got off the bus and they had like an official delegation come out from the maqam to meet Father Dave. And I'm carrying the camera bags and I'm just crying and I'm just walking, crying. And the guy that came out from the delegation said, no photography. I was used to that by now because every time I go to Karbala, it's no photography. I had a copy of the book with me. So I walk in and I'm crying. And he can tell I'm a Shia because everybody else is sitting down and as though they're nowhere. I knew they could be anywhere. And I said, I'd like to give you a gift. So I gave him the book and he grabbed it and he put it aside. I said, no. Open it. He's like, I'll open it later. I said, no, open it now. So this guy is looking at me thinking, who's this rude so-and-so?
Because it's the custom.
Yeah.
It's against the custom.
That's right.
Yeah.
So he opens the book and the first page he opens up on is the maqam of Imam Ali alayhi salam. This beautiful image. He's flicking through. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Abu Fadl Abbas alayhi salam. Talli Zainabi. And I looked at him and I had to stop myself from crying. I said, when I went to Imam Ali alayhi salam, they said, no photography. He said, yeah, it's true. I said, when I went to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, they said, no photography. When I got to Abu, he said, stop talking, just go take your photo.
SubhanAllah.
I went outside and I stood right at the front and I'm thinking, this is nice, but it's not very artistic. It's just me here and that's the maqam. And I looked back and I saw this opening. Went back, set up the camera. The sun is just belting on top of the dome. The tiles on the bottom, because it's such extensive light, reflecting back onto the thing. I'm just about to take my shot 3 men come walking through. Young men.
Okay.
Big guns.
Allah yastur.
And they came and they walked past me and they looked at me. And they went, put their guns behind the door, walked inside. I started taking my photos. They come back out. They pick up their gun. And they walk out. And I'm looking into their faces. I just exploded in tears. They were the men that were protecting Sayyida Zainab.
Ya subhanallah.
And they walked out and you could just see in their faces, never again would Sayyida Zainab alayhi salam stand unprotected in Damascus.
Subhanallah.
And they were the only people there.
Oh, you just hit me hard.
It was just... Now, second version of that story. I'm sitting at the New South Wales Parliament the day before the exhibition. I refer a lot to this exhibition because it's
a major event.
It was one of the ways that we were able to really get out and show others. I'm sitting in the main foyer space of the Parliament. I'm sitting with a brother of mine called Hajj Abdullah. And we're sitting there and all of a sudden, you have to imagine this woman. You really, really do, right? Dressed to the nines. Immaculately dressed, right? She's probably in her early 50s, got an exquisite nature about her, just an absolute regency about her, right? Mm-hmm. And she sees the photo that I've got of Sayyida Zainab because I had taken it to test the hanging system. And she just looks over from across the way and she starts walking to me. And the way that she was walking was like this woman floated on air, and she just walked through and she got right up to me and I stood up when she came to me and she said, "Oh, I love the Taj Mahal."
Astaghfirullah.
And I looked at her and I said, "I like the Taj Mahal too." But this is not the Taj Mahal. Hajj, we had a half an hour conversation about Sayyida Zainab alayhi salam. And this woman walked away absolutely gobsmacked at this historical figure that she'd never heard of called Sayyida Zainab alayhi salam. The strength, the magnanimity of Sayyida Zainab alayhi salam. These people are not used to hearing such words referring to our women, the women of our peoples.
They're too used to the media.
That's right.
The blowing that old trumpet.
It was, for me, I could have gone to the New South Wales Parliament and said the story about the men that were protecting it. And I knew it would have flown over everybody's head and it would have just sounded so aggressive.
Yeah, cliche.
Yeah. But for her, she saw the Taj Mahal. I'm happy with that. I don't have a problem with that. But now she understood who was there. And I think this is the power and potency of this work.
It is.
Now, I know we need to wrap up, and there's something that I really want to talk about.
Take your time.
So in 2016, after I came back, no, I beg your pardon. In 2015, when the Heaven to Heaven project ended, we were in debt, big time. And we actually owed the printer thousands of dollars. And the printer is one of our community. He was incredibly generous and but at the end of the day, these things cost money. Mm-hmm. And we had given him our word that we would pay, and all of a sudden we found ourselves penniless. So I went and apologized to him and said, "Look, just give us some time. We just got to work out how to." So we were running a cafe next to Masjid al-Rahman.
Yes, I know that.
Yeah, so for a short while we were running that. And I grabbed the boys, I said, "Listen here, we have to sell these images to be able to pay back our debts. There's no other way.
Mm.
And I don't care what it sells for. All right? Let's just sell it for anything. And whatever money's left, whatever's residual, if there's any more needed, we're going to have to pay it from our own pockets.
That's right.
And they said, all right, Tikal Allah. So my best friend, a guy who I love and adore as my brother, I've known him since my university days. We've pretty much been inseparable ever since, to his own disappointment, I'm sure. And his name is Hajj Abdullah al-Hur. Actually, a direct relative of Hur.
SubhanAllah.
Yeah. Anyway, this guy's an incredibly astute entrepreneurial thinker. So I've been an auctioneer for as long as I can remember. So I do all the charity auctions for the community and all that sort of stuff.
Mm.
So I said to the boys, I said, look, why don't we just do an auction? We'll just get as many people as we can. We'll do an auction, and whatever we sell these images for, so be it. So we got a group of people together. Hajj Abdullah's there. Hajj Abdullah was not involved in the project in any way.
Mm.
All of a sudden, we get these people down. We raised 3 times the amount that we needed.
SubhanAllah.
Right? Hajj Abdullah is sitting down watching, and I could just see the anger welling in his face.
Why?
I mean, I know this guy really well.
And you can read it.
And I know he was angry. Anyway, we went and paid off the printer. I looked at the boys. I said, boys, look, this project is now finished. I know I photographed these images for Heaven to Heaven, but with your permission, I'd like to have the rights to those images, and I'd like to continue the work. And they were very gracious, and they agreed. So I took back the rights of the images, and I went and sat with Hajj Abdullah, and I copped the verbal beating of my life.
Why?
This guy beat the hell out of me.
Why?
And I felt that big when he finished. He said to me, he said, you guys have got no idea what the hell you're doing. He said, it's embarrassing what you're doing. And I said, why? He said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you the capacity to take these photos. وَعَدِينَ شَيْفِينَ حَالْكُنْ in front of people by showing them to them on your computer screens and printing a few and doing an exhibition. And these images belong to the community. And you guys should be embarrassed that every time you want to do something, you walk around with your hand out saying, can somebody help us? Can somebody give us money? We raised $150,000 to put the Heaven to Heaven project together.
SubhanAllah.
$150,000 that we took from the community.
That's a lot.
And I remember the second ziyarah that we went on after the first exhibition, I was embarrassed. Imagine one person had have come to that exhibition who donated and looked around and said, is that it? Is that what we gave you guys 150 grand for? I mean, 150 grand paid for the documentary, paid for the exhibition, paid for the publication of the book, paid for the hiring of the space. It's all very, very costly.
Yeah, it is.
But it was still other people's money.
Absolutely.
And Hajj Abdullah would just literally laid down the law. He said, mate, he said, if this is what you're going to do, I think this is horrible. He said, you need to be printing this work, using the funds raised from that work to continue your project and give back to Islamic causes. Well, we started that project in 2016.
MashaAllah.
From 2016 till now, the images have raised in excess of $1.8 million for charity.
SubhanAllah. It's all in Allah's barakah.
Absolutely right. And I wanna inshallah end on this. Hajj Abdullah, a few weeks ago, when everything started erupting in Lebanon in the manner that it did, he came up to me and he said, look, I've got about 10 grand put away. And funny enough, I had something about similar to that. He said, if you and I just go and give that 10 grand each to charity, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be happy with that. He said, but you and I both know that's a cop-out. So we bought $20,000 worth of images, which have now raised in excess of $100,000.
SubhanAllah.
Now, we decided to do that again. So what I want to say to your listeners, if they have appreciated any of these images and would like the barakah of hanging these images in their homes, I want them to know that every single cent that they would spend towards that image is going to our displaced brothers and sisters in Lebanon at the moment. Every cent. Not the cost, not the profit, not the... every single cent. And for the foreseeable future, that's how we're going to be dealing with these images.
Allah barik fikum.
So I'm not saying that to big note. I'm simply saying if you've ever thought about buying one of these images, now is the time.
Absolutely. Allah yahmikum, Allah may Allah accept your amal and your deeds. I think you're an incredible human being.
Oh, no.
And inshallah, Allah accepts your pure intentions and your actions, inshallah.
God bless you.
I'd like to thank our viewers for watching. Thank you very much. We'll also, as we've mentioned during the podcast, if you'd like to donate, if you'd like to participate, if you'd like to support in any way, we will be leaving a few links in the description. I'm sure we'll be able to say we'll speak with you.
Sure. I mean, it's
including a link to your.
It's very simple. It's called Images of Karbala, all one word.
Yes.
On Instagram, so they can find us there,
Yep.
and they can direct message me if they want to get any photos.
Inshallah, and Ali will put up those in text on the image and after the edit. Inshallah. Thank you everyone for watching. We are grateful and thank you very much for your time, Hajj Tom, and inshallah we'll catch you next time.
It's been a great privilege, and I really want to salute you for the work that you're doing. God bless you. Keep it up.
We're in the khidmah. And if you guys come up with any ideas, or would you like us to do any activities, etc., particularly out there in the community, please do leave a comment. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe.
Absolutely.
And thank you very much for watching. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.